How come this?
No, no, ahora.
¡Ese culito!
Be related to this. Welcome to the making of Coral, the game about the sea, done in the sea. Yeah, that's what the player did. My name is Carlos Coronado and I am a solo video game developer. After releasing my last game, Infernium, a survival horror game that is all about giving anxiety and disgust to the player, the terrific question came to me again. What do I do now? I didn't know what would be my next game, but I knew what I didn't want to make. Whatever came next would be radically different from Infernium, and in one way or another, it would be related to my biggest passion, diving. So I did the only thing logical to me. I built a small prototype for an idea I had and contacted friends from the video game industry or related to it to pitch them a crazy adventure. 3 months later, we went sailing and diving together to a paradise in northern Catalonia while they're helping me develop and find the essence of what would become Coral. This is the crew that was brave enough to trust me. For most of them, this would be the first time diving or sailing, but they quickly became excellent, salty human beings. Morning, David.
Oh, this is
Hello.
the sides. Oh yeah.
And Jesus Christ resuscitates. And just like that, we started sailing and our journey began. It was a really pleasant trip with excellent wind and waves. But then,
Vamos, bien. Ahora ahí.
the wind just wouldn't stop gusting, and the first night in San Feliu's anchorage was a little bit crazy. Little we knew that next morning, for the trip to Port Lligat, our destination, the sea would literally be a mirror. It was then when the epic fun started.
¡Súbate, David! ¡Repite!
Competition! Competition!
Arturo wins, right? Arturo wins. Arturo wins.
Better textures from real engine.
Best photogrammetry ever, man.
But wait a second. What is a texture? Is photogrammetry even a word? Who is Mr. Unreal Engine? In video game development, we need game engines to make games as cars need engines to run. Unreal Engine 4 is the most famous engine, and it is the free tool I use to make my video games since my very first game. What is really cool about Unreal is that you don't need to know how to code to make games. Instead, you can use blueprints, which is great for starters. But hey, this doesn't mean Unreal is not powerful. The most famous and great games in the industry use Unreal too, like Fortnite or Kingdom Hearts 3. Isn't it cool to use the same free technology as these masters? On the other hand, photogrammetry is a word, yes. It is a process where you take pictures of real-life nature or objects and then generate a 3D model and a texture out of it. It is awesome, and I've used photoscanned assets before, but it is not the case with Coral. And this leaves us to textures. What are textures in video games? In video game development, we call textures to images that we apply to 3D models to give those models color, volume, and you guessed it, yes, textures. However, Coral is also special in this regard, because Coral barely uses any texture. Let me explain. Coral has realistic lighting, fog and particle effects, but it doesn't have realistic textures. Instead, all of the detailing in the corals, animals and plants is done with simple silhouettes. If you take a closer look to almost any prop in Coral, you will be able to see the shape thanks to the silhouette, but won't be able to see any details inside. Why? Because I only use textures to portray silhouettes and some hints of color here and there. That is why it's important to know, in Coral all textures are used handmade silhouettes drawn in a notebook. And where were those drawings done? Well, I'm sure now you can guess why we went to Port Lligat.
First time using a radio.
We are going to use the radio.
Nice.
This?
Wait.
I wait.
Now. Alright.
Okay, now?
Yeah.
Wait. Por Lligat, aquí Argos, cambio. Okay. This?
Yeah.
Por Lligat, aquí Argos, cambio. Hola, estem a la boia P6 i necessitem anar a terra. Ens podeu venir a buscar, sisplau?
Sí, ara passo.
Moltes gràcies. Entrat.
Then something amazing happened. I found something really cool while snorkeling, and I just had to ask for confirmation to our water taxi driver.
Una pregunta de friki del mar. Antes había bloques de hormigón y los quitaste para no hacer daño a Posidonia con lo nuevo, ¿no?
Sí.
Genial, genial. Yo lo he visto y digo, hostia, mira qué detalle más guapo.
Alright, let's start from the beginning. What's an ecologic buoy? Why is it so cool? And how is this related to Coral? This is how a normal buoy usually works. You use a line to attach a boat to the buoy, but the buoy doesn't drift away and stays in place because it has a dead weight in the bottom of the ocean holding it there. Now, here is the awesome part about ecologic buoys. Usually this dead weight is a huge ugly concrete block. There is no problem with this system if it lays in the sandy bottom, but in a Poseidonia meadow like the one in Portugal, it crushes and kills the Poseidonia, leaving an imprint in the meadow like this one. What the guys in care of Portugal did was to substitute this concrete dead weight by a system of beams that allow the Poseidonia to grow in the area. This is exactly the inspiration and knowledge we were looking for in Portugal. Sometimes you just gotta go to the place and see by yourself. Of course, after knowing these ecologic buoys exist, there was no way I didn't draw them to put them in the Poseidonia meadow level in Coral. This is the step-by-step of how an asset is transferred from the seas to Coral. The first step is obvious. Explore the asset and get familiar with its shape and purpose. Also, don't forget to take some pictures as reference. Step 2. Use the pictures as reference, divide the asset in 2D parts and draw them in a notebook. But now the asset is broken. Don't worry for now. Stay with me. Step 3. Take pictures of the drawings and import those pictures to Photoshop for a little composing and color editing. In this case, we need to get rid of all the grays and compose the image as tight as possible for memory purposes. There you go, a texture. Step 4. We are nearly there. Remember how broken our asset looks? Don't worry, import the asset to 3D Studio Max, cut the different parts and compose them in the 3D space. And by the way, don't worry about the black chunks. With a little bit of Unreal Engine 4 magic, we will make those parts transparent. Now the final step. Export the final model and the final texture and import them in Unreal Engine. Now you just have to scale it to its correct size and place it in the world. From the ocean to Coral in 5 easy steps. But don't forget step number 6. Make a paella de l'Empordà with your friends to celebrate.
Bueno. It's like the first PS3 controller. Do you remember?
Oh yeah, yes, it's true.
Nowadays it has a mouth. It's like
Yeah.
a Mass Effect character.
Blah 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 blah.
Blah blah. Ana.
Verás cómo vamos a ir a la cara.
We are going to dive?
To dive.
So now we are going to look for inspiration for coral to the bottom of the sea, where there's all the shit that are gonna be in the game.
Your first dive, right, Peña?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I am already shit in my pants.
Nice. First dive?
I'm scared, man.
Yeah, man.
Super scared.
There's
I'll
gonna
be
be-
happy afterwards, not now.
Of course, the rest of the crew had to experience diving by themselves. We didn't see much fish or marine life, but the sights and the experience will remain forever in the first timers. What an amazing way to unite people diving is.
First impressions,
Incredible!
early access review.
Amazing!
It's a video. Merci, Vinga, vai bé.
We had a great time diving and living in Portugal, but it was time to sail and move to Cala Montjuïc, where all the world and level design of Coral was done. Yesterday we were like, what kind of sea environments can we think about? And the normal ones are going to be a healthy reef, a sandy reef, a shipwreck, a city port, a Poseidonia reef, a shallow reef, a deep sea reef. That's going to be like the main game, like the whole narrative of the game, like what's going to happen, how it's going to happen, why is the player engaged. It's all here, it's all aligned. And also in Pencil you have written what mechanics does the player learn in every level. And there are some notes like cool things we can make. But yeah, it's like what kind of environment and what kind of mechanic the player learns. And this is actually the concept of the first level, and this is the more polished concept. Right now I'm sure you won't understand anything, but this is dope actually. The design of a video game is the most exciting part of the development, in my opinion. It is that part of the process where you grab the pieces of the puzzle you've created, the game mechanics, and put them together to generate levels and something that makes sense for the player. First, you start with sketches of the puzzles and challenges, and then you try to recreate those in Unreal Engine 4 using just the basics. Nothing is beautiful yet, the art style feels empty, but everything is functional. You can play a whole game in this state. This is called the prototype. For example, in the first level, the player learns to collect and use energy. In the second level, he learns about currents and red corals. In the third level, he learns about feather worms, used to gain speed. In the fourth level, he learns how to use speed to switch certain barriers. In the fifth level, he learns about moving parts, and so on and so on. This is the part where the game comes to life. For now it is ugly, but after working some weeks in the art style and the fish system, it all comes together. I'll make another video talking just about accessibility in Coral, but for now, just know you will only need one joystick or input to play Coral. You will be able to adjust text size too, and a lot of implicit features have been designed to make Coral accessible by default for everyone, including casual or non-video game players. We had a great time in Cala Montjuïc. Coral was slowly being transferred from the notebook to Unreal Engine 4, and soon it was time to sail back to port and finish the trip and the game. That day we were so silent and meditative. No one spoke much because we were still processing what we just went through. It was amazing and beautiful, but what really surprised us is how much we bonded between each other and Mother Nature. And this is exactly what Coral is about, bonding. I wasn't sure what was the message Coral had to deliver, or in other words, I wasn't sure what I was telling with Coral. But after this trip, it was clear. Coral is about bonding and feeling connected to your relatives, friends, loved ones, and most of all, nature. This was something I discovered in this trip, and hopefully, when players complete Coral, they will feel it too, and for that, I will always be extremely grateful to the crew, Porgigat, Cala Montjuïc, and of course, the ocean.